Hi, everyone. I'd like to say thank you so much for taking your time to listen to my presentation. My name is Joyce Lungwani. I work for the University of Johannesburg in South Africa. The topic that I'll be presenting on is motherhood as a pathway to resilience, young women's experiences of motherhood after leaving residential care in South Africa. We will start by providing a brief overview of residential care in South Africa. We'll then look at the process of transitioning from residential care to independent adulthood in South Africa. We'll also look at how the theory of resilience is being utilized in care living research in South Africa. We'll then look briefly at the methodology, and the findings section will look at the general experiences of transitioning to motherhood, and it will also look at some of the resilience indicators from the young women. So, for example, how motherhood was experienced as something that provided a sense of belonging, how it provided the young woman with motivation, and how it served as an opportunity to heal. We will then conclude by looking at the implications for practice. So let us now look at sort of like an introduction to the concept of residential care in South Africa. In South Africa, residential care is not necessarily the most common type of alternative care for young people who are in need of care and protection. What we commonly have in South Africa is foster care, where a young person is placed with relatives or close family members, and the state provides support. So, for example, they provide financial support, and we also have social workers who manage the foster care cases, and they visit their families regularly to ensure that they have access to the services that they need. So this is in line with the governmental approach to social welfare, which aims to eradicate underlying issues of poverty and inequality. So when a young person is in need of care and protection, the young person does not necessarily have to be removed from their community, from their familiar surroundings. Instead, the services which the young person needs are brought to the community so that the young person does not have to leave their community. However, there are instances when the community or the families or relatives of that young person do not have the capacity to provide for the care needs of that child. So, for example, if the needs go beyond financial or just everyday care and protection needs, where a child needs sort of like maybe say therapeutic needs which the community does not have the capacity to provide, then that child will have to be placed in another form of alternative care. And it's mostly in residential care facilities, which are also known as child and youth care centers. So because of that, we have a significant number of young people in South Africa who end up in residential care facilities, and these facilities are most common in urban areas than in rural areas. So when I talk about the transition, I'm referring to that point where a young person leaves residential care and go back to the community. So in South Africa, a young person usually leaves residential care to go back to the community or to live independent life at the age of 18. In some instances, a young person can remain in care. For example, if they are still registered with an educational institution, they can still receive the benefits up until the age of 21 or something like that. But after that, a young person is supposed to just go and be an adult and be on their own, or go back to their families if they do have families. And when that happens, in South Africa, we usually do not have many transitioning services available for the youth who are transitioning from residential care to independent adulthood. We do have some non-governmental organizations who are able and willing to provide some services, and some are providing the services, but in most cases, there is a lack of resources, and there's also poor um, policy provisions, and as a result, very few um, people who leave care have access to transitioning services, and they are on their own as they journey to independent adulthood. So because of that, the transition is usually challenging for young people, and this transition takes place in the context of high levels of poverty, high levels of youth unemployment, and inequality. And this transition is generally more challenging for females, because this is the population that is overrepresented in areas of unemployment, gender-based violence, inequality, and so forth. The theory of resilience is gaining increasing attention in care living research, which is a nice thing to observe, because in the previous decades, care living research was very scarce in South Africa, and actually in Africa in general. We didn't have as many scholars researching in the area of care living, and now we have more and more people who are interested in researching this area. The resilience researchers usually focus on the outcomes. They focus on the factors that promote positive outcomes. And recently, there's also a focus on the psychosocial processes of resilience, which bring attention to the young people who leave care. So, for example, it brings attention to the processes in which they engage to facilitate a more successful journey out of care. A closer look at some of the psychosocial processes of resilience. So, for example, striving for authentic belonging, building hopeful and tenacious self-confidence, show a connection between parenthood and resilience. And in a previous study, which compared the psychosocial processes of resilience of males and females after leaving residential care, parenthood emerged as an important resilience enhancing factor in females more than males, which is why in this study we chose to focus on just females to the exclusion of males, because we're interested more in how parenthood was experienced by young females who had left care. So the methodology was a qualitative approach with a phenomenological design. We purposely sampled 6 young women who had left the care of different residential care centers in South Africa. They were between the ages of 19 and 30. We chose to look for young women who were between those ages, because the thinking was, okay, they leave care at the age of 18, and between the age of 19 and 30, that is when they are likely to perhaps have children. Of course, those who have children at 19, it will be early, but it does happen. So that's why we targeted that age. We used semi-structured interviews to collect data, and thematic data analysis process was used. So from the sample of the 6 young women, you can see that we had people between the ages of 21 and 30, and we had all like most racial groups in South Africa represented. So, for example, we had some white people, black people, colored people. And what is interesting there is the age at which they became mothers, with some becoming mothers at the age of 19, which was sort of like immediately after leaving care. But we do have some that had children a bit late. So, for example, we have one who had a child at the age of 28, and all participants were living with their children and reported to be doing well in the process. So we are now moving on to the findings section, and all the topics that you see here will be unpacked as we go along. Without wasting any time, I'll move on to the different topics. So let us look at how the young women experienced the transition to motherhood, which obviously happened from when they realized that they were expecting, that they were pregnant. So for the majority of the young women that were interviewed, motherhood was not planned. So it was just something that happened, according to them. They were like, oopsie, I did not expect this. I did not want this. So for example, Sia there says, becoming a mom was never something that I planned. And then when it happened, I wasn't angry about it anyway. And also, the process of transitioning was characterized by uncertainty. So, for example, the young women did not know what to expect. Lebo says, they're saying, I did not know whether I will be doing the right thing. Will I be doing the wrong things? And, Gugu saying, my daughter is 3 now. Everything is fine. But like in the beginning, it is the fear of, am I going to do the right thing? Can I give my child a good life? And she says that's my biggest fear and still is. Um, so you can see that there's just a lot of fear, which is probably caused by their own, childhood experiences, perhaps of mother-child relationship. And Gugu, one participant going on to say, I'm even afraid to let the father of my child change her diaper because I'm like, is it safe? So she has that fear that, this place is not safe. And like I said earlier, that there are high levels of crimes in South Africa, and some children are abused at a young age. So some young women are like, oh no, I don't want to expose my child to that. I can't even trust the father of the child to touch my child because what if I'm exposing my child to abuse and such things? It's interesting to see that the young women talked about support which they received from significant others, which was an interesting finding because in the previous study, the young women reported to have received no support from the fathers of their children, for example. But in this study, we see young women reporting on the support they received from the fathers of the children and from the mothers of their father's children, which was quite interesting. So, for example, Lebo there says, her grandmother did say to me, if I ever need help and not sure about something, I can literally just go to the house and ask her. And Gugu talks about the father of the child and says, you really helped me. Um, he was there, from when the child was born, and the mother was also the grandmother from the paternal side, and she says the grandmother showed her the ropes because she did not know, she was not sure what to do as a mother. And Sia talked about how she was able to talk to her sister, and her sister was also able to help her mobilize further help, and they even managed to get help from the grandmother of the child from the paternal side. What is interesting here is that the support seemed to come from the paternal side of the family, which would indicate that the young women did not necessarily have much support available from their own families. So, previous research has shown that achieving a sense of belonging, an authentic sense of belonging, is central to facilitating the resilience of young people after leaving care. And we see it in these findings as the young women talk about how being a mother provided them with that sense of belonging. So, for example, we have Gugu there saying that her child filled a gap. She's like, in the beginning, I was scared, but now I cannot live without her. She has taught me how to give love, unconditional love, and how to receive love. And Tato says, it feels like, you know what, I'm not alone anymore. I have a family of my own. And Tato says, even if I go outside and hang the laundry and I come in, his face lights up. And for me, being a mom is like, it's not just you. There is somebody who values you more than you value yourself. So you can see how the young women get to experience that, you know what, having a child, as difficult as it is, as I have to learn things that I'm not familiar with, it also brings about a sense of belonging because now I have a child of my own. I have someone I love unconditionally, and I also feel that this person also loves me unconditionally, and this is my biological family. So the young woman felt, you know what, this is exactly what I need. And the young women also expressed that motherhood to them was sort of like motivation. It served as motivation because for them, it was, this is no longer about me. I have another human being who I have a responsibility to care for. And that sense of responsibility motivated the young women to work hard and to try harder and to want to do better. So, for example, you have Lebo saying, whenever I feel like this is the end of the road for me, I just look at her face and that reminds me that I've made it that far. And Gugu says, my biggest motivation to get up, the child is the biggest motivation. And she says, even when days get hard, I just want to lie down and just be depressed. But I can't do that because I have this person watching me, you know. And we have Lee even saying, if it wasn't for her child, she wouldn't be here. She probably would be dead. And she says her child helps her go through everything, emotionally, just looking at the child and feeling, you know what, I've made promises to this young person and I have to try and I have to do better. And that serves as motivation for them to work hard and to want to do better in life. You will remember when we started, I pointed to the fact that some young women were not very welcoming of this responsibility because of the fears that they had, which were probably due to their own childhood experiences. And we could assume that some of them probably didn't have positive mother-child experiences, and that made them feel really afraid of becoming mothers. And here, these issues come out to the open. So, for example, Sia here talks about how she now understands her mother better, that she understands the decision that her mother took for not caring for her, which is why she ended up in residential care. So motherhood provided her with an opportunity to now think, why did my mother do what she did? Was it because she experienced some of the challenges that I'm experiencing now? So that sort of provides an opportunity for her to confront some of her childhood fears, and memories. And Gugu says, being a mom makes me want to love my kids every day. It makes me want to be or love them in a way that I think I was never loved. So you can sense here that Gugu feels she did not receive the love that she needed to receive from her parent, and she's going to make it a responsibility to ensure that her child receives that kind of love. So I think this sort of like ties in nicely with the resilience perspective, because we are not only looking at the positive outcomes, but we also look at the process that facilitates that, and that also includes healing, so that when you embark on the motherhood journey, you've already confronted your own issues and you can be a more responsible and capable parent. So it looks like the young women who grow up in residential care have limited exposure to the topic of motherhood, which makes navigating the parenting journey quite daunting. And the young women usually do not have positive memories of, mother-child relationships, and when they are in residential care, they are not exposed to real life examples, the examples that they would be exposed to if they were in communities. So because of that, they feel they are not equipped, and it results in fear and uncertainty. However, despite the challenges in navigating the motherhood role, the young women experienced it positively in the end, and it then facilitated psychosocial processes of resilience. And of course, it is important to note that the support which they received during the process was quite crucial in facilitating a positive motherhood journey. Based on the findings, it can be concluded that residential care practice should acknowledge or recognize the fact that young people who grow up in residential care have a right to decide whether or not they want to become parents after leaving care. Therefore, efforts to prepare them for possible future parenthood should be mobilized whilst they are still in care. Empowering young people with appropriate knowledge around safer sex practices and knowledge about responsibilities that come with parenthood can encourage planned parenthood. As we see with the findings, the young women felt they were not prepared for motherhood, which made the journey more difficult. Acknowledging the opportunities that planned parenthood can bring to young people may also foster pathways to resilience. Also, the psychosocial processes that come with planned parenthood, for example, belonging, responsibility, hope, and so forth, have potential to facilitate caregivers' transition towards taking up their full place in society. It would also be very beneficial for research to translate into practice, which would enable resilience enhancing factors such as planned parenthood, taking into consideration the psychosocial processes of resilience that come with planned parenthood, to be enhanced in care through adequate preparation. Thank you very much.